The Cambridge Tech Podcast is supported by Rathbones, a leading provider of individual wealth management services to private clients, entrepreneurs, charities and professional partners. For more information, please visit rathbones.com. The value of your investments and the income from them may go down as well as up, and you could get back less than you invested.
Welcome to the Cambridge Tech Podcast, talking all things technology from the heart of the UK's tech capital. Here are your hosts, Faye Holland and James Parton.
I'm Faye.
And I'm James. Well, it's nice to be back together. We haven't done one of these together for a couple of weeks. So how's your week been, Faye?
It's been pretty busy, and welcome back. You feeling better?
I am, yes. Yeah, so this week I've just been kind of getting back up to speed with everything, but had a couple of interesting conversations with future potential guests and other folks around the Cambridge ecosystem. I'm sure you've been busier, though.
I don't know. Is it a competition? It's always a competition.
No, I'm just saying because I'm not firing on all cylinders, and I know you are. So,
yeah, always firing on multiple cylinders. Yeah, it's super busy as always. We've got the run up to Cambridge Wide Open Day going on. We've got a big press run on Monday, which will be the subject of next week's episode as well. So you can all wait and see for that one. Did some more mentoring on the Impulse program. So yeah, loads of stuff going on. And obviously I was at Founders last week.
Yeah. How was that? Because I did mention you were there, so it'd be great to get your take on things.
Yeah, it was really good. And I did listen to your newsread because obviously I wasn't here last week because of that. And you did mention it. So my updates were, I thought it was a very good showcase of Cambridge to the London audience. The 11 companies presented were absolutely sterling. And, a hat tip to the team, to Gerard, Anne, Mark, Anchor, Connor, Elena and Winnie. They did an absolutely super job for the first iteration of Founders. So I thought it was really good. I've invited Joran Wingard on, who was the chap from Deal Room, who was presenting, and you ran through some of the updates on news as well last week. But a couple of things for me: more unicorns per capita than anywhere else in the world out of Cambridge, and 17 times the VC value from Cambridge than the rest of the UK. So, some really good numbers coming out independently for that. So I thought it was interesting. The pitches were great. Like I said, they did really well. A few of them had changed quite a bit since the first time I'd seen them. And obviously we both know them from Trinity Bradfield and 21 to Watch as well. But I think the thing that really came through was Founders' ability to connect them with the industry. So there was some really strong messages coming out of there as well.
And on that note, an interesting decision to run the demo day in London and not Cambridge. I think, an interesting signal of intent there to really kind of, connect to outside of the Cambridge ecosystem and go wider.
Yeah, and there were definitely different people there. There are a lot of the same kind of people there. But, we are perfectly capable of leaving Cambridge. It's not like we're all chained to Cambridge. It's quite easy. And there is no excuse to getting on a train and going to King's Cross. So, it was seriously accessible for everyone. So, yeah, it was really good. It's really good.
Good. Yeah, it's good to hear.
And so one other piece of a little update, which I thought I would share, which just shows the reach of this podcast is growing so much. I was speaking to Anne Bailey of Form the Future, and she was saying, and I won't name the individual or the company, but it was a large multinational that had picked up on Form the Future from the podcast and had then reached out to Anne and has started to build a relationship. So I'm super pleased, as well as having the tech connections and the eco connections, the fact that we can do things that are helping the community interest companies and charities. I think that's brilliant.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's great to hear. I mean, that was the whole reason we set this up, right? It was just to shine a spotlight on all the great things that are happening in the city.
Yep. Indeed, indeed. So let's go through a few of the things that have happened this week, news-wise. So first one, European VC firms Octopus Ventures and Red Alpine have co-led a $30 million seed funding round in Cambridge biotech called Expression Edits. It was founded in 2021 by Dr. Kurt Tomberg, Professor Alan Bradley, and Dr. Liliana Antunes, based on research from the University of Cambridge. And the company's proprietary intronization technology revolutionizes gene design by mimicking the natural genetic landscape. So super excited to see them growing. They were a 21 to watch winner only a couple of months ago. And obviously this funding is great and it's going to be really impactful for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And on that note, another funding story. Deep tech venture builder Cambridge Future Tech has just closed its latest round. They've just raised $5 million to unlock the UK's tech potential ahead of a crucial election for national industry strategy. So since they launched in 2022, CFT has created 10 deep tech ventures so far across the UK, with several more currently in the build phase, which have generated over 80 highly skilled jobs, and they've raised collectively 10 million in external funding. Those ventures have been awarded over 4.5 million in grants as well, which supports vital research and development efforts. Their portfolio now has an aggregate valuation surpassing 50 million at pre-seed, and CFT has successfully guided 6 ventures through their pre-seed rounds in the past year. So great news. And if you didn't catch it, check out episode 75 for our interview with Cambridge Future Tech CEO Owen Thompson.
Superb. And another update from another previous episode as well, with Texas Medical Centre, TMC, in partnership with Innovate UK, has announced that Heartfelt Technologies is one of 16 companies to be joining the second cohort of the Innovate UK and TMC Innovation Accelerator programme. The programme is designed to help innovative companies grow and scale their US strategy and market plan. And you can tune in to episode 62 to find out from Oriane and Seamus about more on their expansion plans.
I love that we're building up this library of different episodes that we can call back to. It's great, isn't it? Okay, so next news story is a new pilot which is being undertaken by Featurespace and Pay.uk, which has demonstrated unprecedented capability to save customers millions of pounds who come under attack from online fraudsters. The target of the trial was authorised push payment fraud, in which victims are manipulated into making real-time payments to fraudsters, typically by social engineering attacks involving impersonations.
And from crime busting to counterfeit busting, pharmaceutical pirates peddling counterfeit health products are being sunk by new technology from Cambridge coding and marking innovator Domino Printing. The counterfeiting intending to dupe patients and consumers is a growing problem, but Domino is working with manufacturers in the sector to deliver a range of coding solutions. These include two-dimensional codes such as 2D data matrix and QR codes, which can improve traceability throughout the supply chain and enable future-proofing of their production lines ahead of forthcoming regulations.
Next, we have Hanwha Phaser, who we talked about in February's newsread, which has expanded its strategic partnership with Germany's Lufthansa Technik. The extension in the partnership will see Lufthansa Technik design, build and supply hundreds of fuselage mounted SATCOM radomes, which are the aerodynamic covers for Hanwha's active electronically steered antenna, which has been designed for both commercial and military aviation.
And lastly, more good startup news, with Fuse Diagnostics completing an oversubscribed seed round, raising a total of 1.6 million from a syndicate of angel investors alongside Innovate UK. Fuse is the brainchild of the founders of Sense Biodetection, Harry and Ralph Lamble, who developed the world's first rapid instrument-free molecular diagnostic test during the pandemic.
Fabulous. So that's this week's tech news. So let's move on to this week's guest, and we promise you this episode is a cracker.
So I keep saying, I love this episode. And then another episode comes in and I really love this episode. So, like any good mother, you don't have a favourite, right? But I agree, you're going to love this one. So welcome to the podcast to Hanadi Jabado. It's a really enlightening conversation covering a huge array of topics from entrepreneurship, tech for good, DEI, and things that you would never consider including how to wear a sword. So here we go. So welcome, Hanadi, to Cambridge Tech Podcast.
Thank you very much for having me, both of you. It's amazing to be here with you at the Bradford Centre this morning.
So do you want to just introduce yourself to our listeners? You've been in Cambridge for quite a while. You are a bit of an icon, a bit of a legend around here. So tell everyone about who you are and what you've been doing.
So it's a bit daunting to be introduced this way, to be honest. And I might get my children to listen to this and say, hey, I'm an icon, I'm a legend. So I came to Cambridge for the first time a long, long time ago when the dinosaurs were roaming as an exchange student. To do just a couple of months of a law degree, absolutely fell in love with Cambridge and thought, one day I'll come back. And I came back to study at the Judge a little bit later. Dinosaurs were still roaming. And my year was the first cohort to inhabit the Judge Business School. So before it was the old Addenbrooke site, got sold and refurbished, and the Judge started in 1990. And for 4 years, they were hot desking across the university. But my cohort really was the first to trash the place. And it was absolutely amazing. Super entrepreneurial, was part of something really interesting. And for me, Cambridge has been like Hotel California. You can check out anytime you want, but you can never leave. Any attempts to leave, you keep on getting drawn back to the energy of the university, of the town, of the amazing people. And so I've been in and out of Cambridge since 1990 and love it. And now I live here with my 4 children and 2 dogs.
I mean, that's a great story to hear. You were part of the first student cohort of the business school and then went on to have a number of executive roles within the business school itself. So why don't we start there? Well, let me start with a really high level question. What is the role of a business school at a top level university?
So that's a great question, because actually the Judge is quite special, a bit like Said at Oxford, part of, a world-class university led by science and research. We punch, I still say we, even if I don't work there, punch really way above our weight and compared to our competitors in the US. And they are standalone business schools. If you look at Wharton, if you look at Harvard, they're standalone business schools, not connected to a world-leading research university. So just to put it in context, Cambridge is a collegiate university. You've got 31 colleges, I don't know how many departments. And you have to remember that Cambridge is a spin-out of the University of Oxford. 800 years ago, people escaped Oxford to start a brilliant university based on freedom. So we're a spin-out based on freedom. So everybody's free to do whatever they want. And then research is really important. Science is really important. And some colleges still don't take law students or business school students because they consider them as vocational. So just to give you the spirit. And then you've got business school. And when you go to the university library, how many categories do you have for business compared to theology? And when you challenge that, they look at you and say, how long has business been a subject? How long has theology been a subject? And it's so true. So that gives you the context of how we can be an oddity in a place like Cambridge. I'm a great believer that to take us being Cambridge, but also the wider the UK, from being a research nation to being a unicorn nation, we really need to upskill our scientists with business skills. And we need to take us from just pure research to actually looking at building great businesses out of that great research. Right now, if you look at the investment and the return on investment in science and research, we as the UK are 20 times ahead of our competitors in the US. The return on investment for each pound invested in research. I mean, we're so efficient. We don't have as much money, so we have to think harder. And it really works. But then, in terms of commercialization, this is where we lag. Why? Because our scientists are not equipped with the business skills. And this is where a business school plays a key role by working with the departments and upskilling the scientist with business skills.
That's really interesting. And, when we think about the podcast itself and the founders that we speak to each week, entrepreneurship as a subject within the business school, there's a Entrepreneurship Centre. Was that there from day one, or how did that evolve as the judge grew?
When I was a student at the business school and the dinosaurs were roaming, there was one entrepreneurship course taught on the MBA program. As things developed, there was a Center for Entrepreneurial Learning that was there teaching people that actually entrepreneurship is for them and trying to get people to consider entrepreneurship as a career. So there were quite a few programs. They were, disjointed. They were bits and pieces. They were not even aware of each other, So I left the judge, went to London, realized that actually there were lots of accelerators for internet companies, web companies, B2C, but there was nothing for deep tech, and put together an accelerator program for deep tech companies. And I kept on coming back to the university saying, you need to do more to support your scientists. You need to do more to accelerate. And the words I heard most were, no. This is not what we do. No. And as a true entrepreneur, the word you hear most is no. So what you have to do is turn it into a yes. And you have to be resilient enough to get there. In 2012, there was a new dean at the business school interested in innovation and entrepreneurship, interested in making changes. I was on the alumni council back then, met him 6 months before he started, and he was trying to get the feel. And he said, so what do you think should change? And I said, there are two things that I'd love to change at the business school. One is women, and two is entrepreneurship. And he said, what do you mean about women? I said, well, it's a disgrace that we have only one woman professor and that all of your support staff is female. But what about the people lecturing as students and the proportion of students that are female? And the second one is entrepreneurship. I felt that the business school back then was in its ivory tower and really standing alone in Cambridge, not really connected into the ecosystem, and very much wanted to support the university, but also the wider business community, because there are lots of businesses that are not part of the university, and wanted really to turn that different. So Professor Loch said, well, give me some time and let's talk. And 6 months later, we had a chat, talked about how to set up that deep tech accelerator. We started working on Accelerate Cambridge in Q4 2012. And in January 2013, we took on the first cohort of Accelerate Cambridge companies. I ran the accelerator for 2 years, and as part of those 2 years, there were some changes happening. And one day, Christoph said, we need to look at how we can take this strategically and put it in the strategy of the business school. So we did a review, realized that there was a need to create an entrepreneurship center and to consolidate the entrepreneurship offering of the business school, going all the way from, awareness about entrepreneurship, starting a business, scaling a business, and growing a business.
So when I said earlier about you're a bit of a legend, actually Accelerate and the Entrepreneurship Centre, you ultimately kind of crafted and created them and took the role.
Success has many fathers and failure has one mother. So if it hadn't been successful, I would have said, yes, it's all me. But because it's a success, actually, there was an amazing team behind it. There was clear leadership at the business school. So Professor Loch was really behind it. I was lucky enough to be paired with an amazing academic, Stelios Kavadias. You have to really laugh because we would meet in the business school in the common room in the open area, and we'd have frank exchanges. And we never realized that there was a vacuum around us growing bigger and bigger because people thought we were arguing, a French Lebanese and a Greek having, intense, passionate conversations. People were terrified, really literally terrified until we decided to take it in a more structured way. And then Luther Phillips, who joined the Accelerate Cambridge, and then an amazing team of coaches on the Accelerate program, lecturers from the whole business school. So, yeah, I am very happy to take the credit, but I've got to say I had an amazing ecosystem and an amazing team supporting me. So,
yeah, you were there for quite a while as well.
Almost a decade.
Yeah.
So we'll definitely come back and pick up the point you made about diversity later in the conversation. Just to kind of tie up the thread on the entrepreneurship side of things, you often hear the phrase entrepreneurship is a contact sport. So how do you go about teaching entrepreneurship?
It is a contact sport, by the way. I fully agree. It is an absolute contact sport. Entrepreneurship is first and foremost raising the awareness within people that entrepreneurship is for them. Unfortunately, when you open a newspaper or a magazine, the entrepreneurs that you see are people that you're an entrepreneur, Faye. I don't think you would relate to some of the entrepreneurs that are showcased in the newspapers. You know, not everybody looks like, I mean, you don't look like Richard Branson and you're an entrepreneur, you know, but this is the kind of entrepreneurs that are showcased, and people look at that and say, well, actually, I'm not an entrepreneur. So the first job that we have is to actually tell people, you can do this. This is for you. And basically make it possible for them. So you do that by raising their self-efficacy and demystifying what entrepreneurship is. And then entrepreneurship is really business, is how do you take a product, an idea, and turn it into something that's going to make money. And basically it's just how do you teach business? It's exactly the same thing. And I generally believe it is, and I'm going to offend a lot of people. I apologize in advance. It is much easier to upskill a scientist, a PhD in science, or in arts and humanities in business than it is to upskill an MBA student and get them to understand the deep tech. Apologies to everybody that I offended here or there. So going back to your first question, this is the unique roles that both Saeed and Judge can have in the UK, is actually being able to reach out to the scientists and upskill them. And that's really crucial.
And it's also about creating those communities as well, isn't it? Because the more you can see it, the more you want to be it, you know, that old adage. But actually, all the different programs, they create the alumni and they create this amazing ecosystem of, you know, people who've gone through and done that process themselves.
So we are incredibly lucky in Cambridge that everybody is so generous with their time. If you make an introduction, or if James makes an introduction, you will speak to whoever you've introduced. It's not the same everywhere. So in Cambridge, you have within your reach anyone that can help you take your idea one step closer. And you're absolutely right about the community. We have not just the alumni on those programs, but you've got people who are mentoring, you've got people who are coaching, and you've got people who are working with large corporates coming and volunteering their times. I will always be grateful to AstraZeneca for when they moved to Cambridge, because they decided that they didn't want to be some alien colony landing into Cambridge and staying apart. They really wanted to support the ecosystem. And they came and knocked at the door of the business school, and they have systematically supported all of the programs and systematically provided mentors to the companies and systematically provided non-executive directors to sit on the board of those companies to help them professionalize and scale. So it takes a village to raise a child, and it takes definitely a Cambridge village to raise the amazing entrepreneurship ecosystem we have.
So talking about the ecosystem and giving up time, as well as doing the roles at the Judge, you also have sat on many boards. So Satavia, Helix, Curate, we can talk about as well in a moment. What was it like sitting on those boards?
A learning experience each time. So it's, for me, I have a different view on boards than your average investor. Most of the time, investors believe that you do not need a board until you're at Series A, and that until you get to Series A, all you need is the founding team and potentially an investment director. I have a completely different perspective. I want the companies that I work with to scale. So you need to lose the amateur behavior from early on, and you need to bring in people who are going to help you professionalize. And instead of, MBA, management by accident, really go by a strategic view. And you can only do that if you have people who have experience coming onto the board. So I'm going to give you one example, and one that you haven't mentioned. The first board I actually agreed to join was the board of Cambridge Spark. Raul Irma is the most inspiring entrepreneur I have gotten to work with over the last decade. Lots of geniuses out there, but people who are as coachable, as able to learn, they don't come by the dozens. So Raul was quite clear about what he wanted to build. And he was also quite clear about the impact he wanted to have. And I was mentoring him and advising him on an informal process. And he applied to Innovate UK to get a loan. £1 million. £1 million for a company that was turning over less than 100K. That was quite punchy. And Innovate UK Loans believed in him, believed in his business plan, and decided to support him. But what Innovate UK Loans do is that they put conditions to the loan, and they do good monitoring and good curation. And they said, you need a board. You can't do this on your own. So not asking you to get a co-founder, but you need to get a proper board. And that professionalization was transformative for Raul. And I am not sure that he would have put together a board back then if he hadn't had that condition from the Innovate UK loan. And I think if you ask him, that is really what made the difference. It's actually sitting down, and putting a 3-year budget in place, putting a 3-year strategy in place, being accountable, having somebody who's not in the business on a daily time challenging you onto the direction, somebody you can use. It's lonely being the CEO of an early stage company, somebody that you can pick up the phone and say, hey, I'm having a wobble. Is this the right thing? So those are really exciting. And I fire myself every 2 years. So make sure that I don't become, an obstacle to growth. So I believe that everything that I haven't achieved within 2 years, somebody else should do, because it's time to move on. So I fire myself every 2 to 3 years from the boards.
So, the timing point you made there is really interesting, as well as the tenure. It's a 2-part question really on both sides of the coin. What would your advice be to a founder in terms of what does a good board member look like? And then for board members, what do you see your role as being a valuable board member?
My advice to founders is get yourself an independent non-executive director, not one of your investors, somebody who is completely independent, somebody whom you can trust, who's going to be able to connect with you and coach you, but also someone who's going to put you on the straight line when you mess up, because this is the person you report into, and maybe they will be the person to fire you down the line. So it's really important. It's someone with whom you can work. And the reason why they need to be independent, and I'm insisting on the independence, is you've got the interest of the company, you've got the interest of the founders, and you've got the interest of the investors. In an ideal world, all 3 of them are aligned, and it's a perfect column. But in real life, the interest of the founders are to the right, the interest of the investors to the left, and the interest of the company are in the middle. A good NED will pull those so that they can overlap. And the better the NED, the bigger the overlap. And this is where the magic happens. And it's really important that it's someone who's not financially invested in the company, because you do not want their advice to be motivated by their own personal return.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. And I like the approach that you said then about you fire yourself every 2 years. I think a lot of boards could be a lot stronger if that happened, but I feel sometimes, and maybe I get shot for this, people get on boards and they want to stay because it looks really good on their CV and for a variety of other reasons. So actually being responsible and saying, no, I've done my stint, I think is really powerful.
You need to have a handover to the next stage. But it is really important to make sure that you don't become so embedded in the company that you become an obstacle rather than a catalyst for change. Advice for people who want to become non-executive director: do it. Learn. Be open. There are lots of courses to become a non-executive director of large companies. There are some courses for SMEs. There's nothing, I haven't found anything for startup boards. AstraZeneca have developed their own NED course. It's really important to understand your responsibilities as a director of a startup. And it's also really important to understand the nature and the DNA of a startup, because it's very different from the one of an SME or a large company. So if you are the CEO of a company, become the Ned of another company, you learn so much it's so much easier solving other people's problems, but you learn a lot as well and sharing good practice.
So let's move on now and talk about Sana Capital. Do you want to introduce what the fund is and what your objectives are?
Sana was the fruit of a lot of thinking, wanting to change the ecosystem for early stage companies. At Sana, our mission, and it's our strapline, is capital to heal the world. We want to heal the world's population and also heal the world by funding the right climate and habitat and water startups. We are an early stage fund looking at supporting at seed and Series A. Quite small. We're fundraising, so I hope we're going to be able to talk about the fundraising landscape at the moment. It's brutal. So it's been 2 years of knocking at doors, people, sitting on the fence saying like that, but we need to wait a little bit. So the aim is to raise 50 million and to invest in a very highly curated portfolio of companies in health tech and in climate tech.
So that would be your first investment round, or have you got a portfolio?
We have a portfolio of companies that we've invested in as angels that will warehouse. And so we've got a handful of companies already in the portfolio, but we haven't done a first close with Sana.
Okay. And in terms of deal flow, are you looking UK, globally? What are you just looking for the best possible, solutions in those areas that you outlined?
So we're based in Cambridge. The 3 partners are based in Cambridge, but we are European. Okay. And we are looking at the UK, but also Western Europe. Small fund, small team, so we can't cover the whole world. And we are looking mostly at the UK, France, Germany, and the Nordics, where we have strong ties and where we know the ecosystems. Absolutely.
I mean, with your networks, are you kind of closely aligning to university spin-outs, or are you a broader?
So specifically in Cambridge, you've got the spin-outs, but you also have the sneak-outs, So what we're looking for, more than just university, is really founders who have a solution that is going to change the way we are looking at patients and moving away from patients to talk about people. We want to keep people healthier longer, and we want them to get the best care possible. So we look at tech bio companies, marrying machine learning, artificial intelligence with everything that is biology related.
Interesting. So you touched there on the funding kind of outlook or the landscape right now. As Faye alluded to, we have spoken to a number of investors and also Chris at Mishkondareya, and it sounds like you're a little bit more pessimistic about the short-term bounce back of the markets. What's your take on when capital might start to flow a little bit more freely?
I, again, do not want to make anyone nervous, but I think, as everybody knows, half of the world population is right now waiting for a change of leadership, elections everywhere. Right. And mostly I'm going to focus on elections on both sides of the pond. And it might sound completely counterintuitive, because I know that once those elections have come and gone, regardless of the outcome, capital will start flowing. But until then, people are not going to start making investment. And by people, I'm talking about LPs. The LPs are those who invest in VCs, and then VCs will invest in the startups. So VCs that have raised are very nervous, because you're never sure if you're going to be able to draw down all of the money that you fundraised. But in this current environment, there's something that people are not talking about. It's those drawdown calls that have been unanswered. So those that have cash in the bank are really keeping that cash to support companies already in their portfolio. And everyone is being very careful. I think that Q1, Q2 of 2025 is going to look much more positive than where we are at right now in April 2024.
And do you think that it will be specific sectors that start to come out before others? Is it going to be deep tech, life sciences? Have you got any feeling of that?
So I'm in the health tech world, so my guess would be health tech. Health tech is doing better. Actually, if you look at the numbers, we're doing better than other things. Deep tech will always be very attractive, and LPs are getting more educated around what deep tech is and the lack of business model for deep tech companies. So this is more positive. But, it's not all doom and gloom. Good companies are raising. You touched on Curate early on. They've just announced their last funding round. There's a joke going on amongst VCs that a flat round is the new up round. In Curate's case, they didn't even have to do a flat round. There's been a rectification in the market, and not all companies are raising, but good companies with good plans are fundraising, and they're fundraising on good terms. Not the crazy valuations we saw in 2021 and 2022, but good, solid valuations. So reasonable companies, solid companies, quality companies are raising. So I think what 2024 is about is moving from no funding and flat rounds to quality fundraising rather than quantity fundraising. So VCs will do quality deals rather than a volume of deals. And I think in 2025, we're going to start seeing more deals.
And as well as the valuation side of things, do you think the size of rounds will maybe realign themselves? Because I mean, about 10 years ago, certainly in the software sector, Series A's were probably around about 1.52 million. And it seems to have like 10x'd over a decade to like massive Series A's. Do you think that's going to kind of adjust and lower slightly more towards where we were, a decade ago? Or do you see that continuing?
So, things are cyclic. So right now, people are raising what they need to get to the next inflection point. As an investor, as a mentor, this is what I recommend to my companies anyways, which is do not raise 3 times what you need. Raise what you need plus a buffer to get to the next inflection point. There was a lot of vanity raises where companies were raising as much as they could. And basically that money actually gets lost because you achieve what you need to get to the next inflection point. If you have too much money, you tend to spend it a bit too fast and not necessarily, hypercharging your growth. So I think that unfortunately human nature is such that we'll go from that prudent stage of raising just as much as you need or as much as you can to stretching this a little bit more, and then going back to this vanity raise. It's a vanity raise on the founders and the entrepreneur side, but it's almost predatory on the investor side because encouraging the founders to raise more means that you buy a larger chunk of the company at a lower price than waiting to the next inflection point. So right now, necessity is such that companies are raising just as much as they need. As soon as capital gets looser, I think, unfortunately, with human nature, we'll go back to the bad habits. It's a bit like my dieting, it's perfect in the first few weeks. And then, I start cutting corners and, before I know it, I need to start all over again.
If you are a startup looking to grow in Cambridge, the Bradfield Centre offers a range of flexible membership packages which put you in control of your office and home working mix. There's a vibrant, collaborative atmosphere, on-site cafe, plenty of green outside space, and regular member social events. We also offer a range of high-quality meeting spaces for hire, and for tech event organisers, our auditorium, lakeside pavilion and atrium spaces are perfect to bring your communities together for in-person and hybrid events. For more information, visit bradfieldcentre.com or call 01223 919 600.
I wanted to go back to the comment you made right at the beginning of the conversation around inclusion and diversity and representation. As you develop through your career and you're now looking at the world through the lens as an investor, what's your current take on the state of D&I at the moment?
That's a really good question. I can talk to you from my own perspective as an investor fundraising, and I can talk to you about what I see in terms of deal quality and my portfolio of investment, if that works for you. So coming to the UK, so remember, I'm not British. I came to the UK and I was surprised at the social fabric. I think it's when I came to the UK that I realized that I was a woman. And please don't laugh, but until then, I never thought it as an issue. And I came to the UK and I realized that wherever I went, I was either the only woman or one of the very few women. I can be gender blind and not see a lot of things, but that became something that was really, getting at me in the sense that whatever I did, it seemed to be that I was the only woman in the room. And it's not right. And I think that there is a cultural and a societal approach that women feel it's too hard. They don't want to get into that room because they do not like what they're going to hear or the way they're going to be treated. And it's just easier to stay just the level below. So for the last 20 years, first I had to get off my high horses and say, actually, I'm going to embrace the fact that I'm a woman and I'm going to be seen. And I am going to open the gate and keep it as wide open as possible. For me, and I'm stealing this from a briefing I heard, it's not about lowering the bar. It's about widening the gate. And I'm going to add, really keeping that gate as open as possible to let people through. So again, maybe hard to believe, but I'm very shy and it's very hard for me to go and even talk to the two of you. I know Faye quite well, so I feel comfortable. But, putting yourself out there, and it's important to be out there and to be seen and to be heard so that actually other people can come. I was invited to speak at an event in Holland, engineering, deep tech. And I was asked, what were you looking for when you came? I said, well, if I was looking for diversity, this was not be the place. There were 10 women, 200 people in the room. And I had 8 young women come and say, thank you so much for calling it out. What can we do? I said, well, call it out. I shouldn't be the only person calling it out. Calling it out, do not accept the status quo. So widening this, it's still not easy to be a woman, even a woman investor. Fundraising, I know that I am talking to people who have the money, who are men, who are not used to someone like me sitting on the other side. And when I say somebody like me, it's not just my gender, it's also my ethnic background. And people invest in people. So having more women investors will not mean that women will be kinder to women, but they will actually see somebody on the other side of the table and understand that actually you can build a business and be a woman. Whereas right now, unfortunately, on the other side of the table, you still have people who have their either very conscious sometimes or super unconscious bias. So you need more female LPs, you need more female investors, and we need to stop the narrative that women founders are not getting funded, because actually women founders are getting funded, but they're being drowned in the quantity. So I was talking earlier about quality deals rather than quantity deals. So if you shrink the quantity, and you look at the numbers, there's some Bohurst research that shows that the overall quantity of deals in medtech has gone down. The overall quantity of male-founded businesses raising money has come down. But actually, the number of female-led businesses raising in medtech has gone up, and the number of co-led female and male businesses in medtech and health tech has gone up as well. So in terms, women are getting funded, not as many as men because there are less women, but the ones that are out there are quality deals. And in this market where we're seeing a shrinkage of the investment, that quality is being recognized.
Stuff we need to be shouting about and showcasing.
But again, if you look at the narratives in the newspapers, recognizing good stuff doesn't sell papers, but saying, 2% of women founders get funded, it's all about the data, how you exploit that data and how you communicate it.
Yeah. And I'm not going to get you starting talking about the importance of data, because maybe that's something we should talk about on a separate podcast. But I actually want to go in a completely different angle now. So thank you for all of those insights you've given us already. But I want to talk to you about your latest role. Although I say it's latest role, you've been doing it for probably 12 months now, and this is as Deputy Lieutenant. So first of all, could you explain, because not everyone will understand what that role is, what is the role and why did you agree to do it?
What an amazing question as well. So it is actually next week is going to be 12 months since I received my commission as Deputy Lieutenant of Cambridgeshire. It's incredibly humbling. I mean, getting the call from the Lord Lieutenant asking me whether I would say yes I was shocked. Let me explain what a Lord Lieutenant is and what a Deputy Lieutenant is. The first and foremost is the UK is divided in shires, and the monarch cannot be everywhere. So in every single shire, you've got somebody who stands in lieu of the king, and that is the Lord Lieutenant. In Cambridgeshire, we are incredibly lucky to have an amazing Lord Lieutenant, a woman called Julie Spence. She is a source of inspiration, energy, altruism, incredible person, very, very inspiring. She puts me to shame in her desire of inclusivity, in her desire of a fair representation. Traditionally, the Lord Lieutenant stands in lieu of the monarch in the shires. So they represent the king, and their remit is to make sure that we are living in a fair and representative community. It goes from citizenship ceremonies, where when somebody becomes British, they get a citizenship certificate. It's incredibly touching. I've witnessed this a couple of times. And the Lord Lieutenant is there, one of the deputies, all the way to promoting the King's Awards for voluntary services, recognizing the amazing work that people are doing in the community, encouraging people to apply, but also recognizing their work. It's also recognizing the work that SMEs are doing by promoting the King's Awards for Enterprise. I'll touch on that later. To remembrance services and others. So the King can't be at every single opening, can't be everywhere. Their Lord Lieutenants are there. In a county as big as Cambridgeshire, as diverse, the Lord Lieutenant can't be everywhere and needs a team of deputies. And this is where each county has a certain number of deputies. In Cambridge, there are quite a few. In Cambridgeshire, there are even more. I think we're about 50. And traditionally, the deputy lieutenants are recognized for their work in the community, their work for the monarchy, and what they've done to date to contribute to society. It's an incredible honor to be asked. It's very humbling. Being a woman, being non-British, you the imposter syndrome, as in, why me? And will I be good enough? And am I going to let everybody down? Always comes as a first reaction. When you look at your traditional deputy lieutenants, they're of a certain age, a certain gender, certain social background. What Julie has done is really to assemble a very diverse group of deputy lieutenants from really different ethnic background, gender, societal background, and also geography, because Cambridgeshire is not just Cambridge. And she wants to make sure that we have representation across Cambridgeshire. So talking about teams, talking about ecosystems, I look at my fellow deputy lieutenants and I am inspired and awed, and I want to be a better person, and I want to be just as good as they are one day. So it's really inspiring. So when you ask me why, I said yes. So it's looking at that group of people and wanting to emulate their achievements, but also really close to my heart, entrepreneurship, SMEs. We celebrate in the UK, we're a startup nation. We celebrate people who start up. There is this myth everywhere. What we don't do is celebrate those that keep going. Right? So you start up and you go from 0 to 10 employees quite quickly. You get funding, and then but what about those that have been going for so many years? Those that are actually the bread and butter of the economy, those that are the backbone, those that are the real fabric. It's so hard and so lonely being stuck into that 10 to 500 employees bracket. And there's no support program out there for them. There's no recognition. Well, the King's Award for Enterprise, which used to be the Queen's Award for Enterprise, recognize those that keep going. They have 4 categories. Those that are mostly known are international trade and innovation. But just before COVID, they launched 2 new ones. One is social mobility and the other one is sustainability. In Cambridgeshire, we rank quite high in the League of Shires in the number of King's Awards that are awarded every year. We're not top league, but we are really in the second tier. My ambition is to take us into the top league. My second ambition is to make sure that together with all of my deputy lieutenant fellows, we recognize businesses outside of Cambridge, in Huntington, in Peterborough, in the Newmarket side that is in Cambridgeshire, and we go wider because there are some businesses out there. So if you're listening to this and you're a business in Ely or elsewhere, please get in touch, see how we can support you. And thirdly, we do really well in innovation, really well in international trade, but we actually have amazing businesses doing amazing things in sustainability and amazing things in social mobility. And I really want us to be the shire that has the most King's Awards in enterprise, in social mobility and in sustainability.
There's a challenge for our listeners. Find out more and start applying.
Sounds fascinating. Must be hugely rewarding because I guess you get to see a broad range of SMEs outside the kind of tech and life science bubble that we all work in, and you get to see the amazing charitable work that goes on across the region. It must be really fulfilling. And what kind of training do you get? How do they prepare you for this job?
So you do get an induction day, and but it's like everything, it's about mentoring. So you become a deputy lieutenant and you get your commission, and your commission has a sell-by date. It's your 75th birthday. Okay. So you are a deputy lieutenant until you turn 75. I've got a little while to go, but you have people who've been doing it for a long time, and they are an amazing community, and they're great at mentoring, always great at picking up the phone and answering when you call and say, how do I do that? And of course, Julie is there, always answering questions.
Fascinating.
And on the training, you kind of chuckled a little bit at the start of that. So let's do the fun bit of the answer as well. But before we started recording, you're trained on how to walk?
Not to walk.
How
to march in a uniform. Marching is not the same as walking. And for an entrepreneur like me, following anyone's rhythm is pretty hard. And but as you know, I row. So rowing has been a good training into that. And carrying a sword is not something that I ever thought I would do, and natural. How do you sit with a sword? So all of this is learning, but also there is a handbook that has been put together by the previous Vice Lord Lieutenant. Very thorough, lots of information. When do you wear a sword? Women deputy lieutenants didn't have a uniform until quite recently. Our uniform is either with trousers or a skirt. I found out, for instance, that you can't wear as a sword with a skirt. I mean, it's just things like that. But more importantly, it's not so much about the uniform or the sword or the marching. It's about the will to have a positive impact on society and to recognize the amazing unsung heroes that are around us. And there are so many of them. And, they range from people who play the organ in church every Sunday. I mean, when I had my investiture last year, I heard about this woman who never missed a Sunday for 35 years playing the organ. And she would take her children on holidays, but the holidays would start after church on a Sunday and finish on a Saturday. She never missed that. I mean, that dedication, supporting the community is just as admirable as a gentleman who received an honor for starting the largest AI group at the university. So it's wide range, and it's celebrating those everyday heroes. And most of the time, they don't see themselves as such, and going to them and saying, do you know about the King's Award for Voluntary Services? And oftentimes they don't, and say, well, you should find someone to nominate you, or finding a group that is doing amazing work and saying you should apply. It's really rewarding and very humbling.
Well, Faye introduced you as a local legend, and this conversation did not disappoint. So thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you very much, both of you, for having me.
Today's show was produced by Carl Homer of Cambridge TV and supported by our media partner, Business Weekly. The Cambridge Tech Podcast is available on all major podcast platforms and on cambridgetechpodcast.com. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please give it a 5-star review. It will really help others discover the show.